Howdy folks, you finally made it to the end of 2024's PaleoRewind. Hopefully you enjoyed my friend Harrison Duran's video on the discoveries published in November. He always does a splendid job with his cinematography and that voice. Anyways, enough bromance for now. Hope you're ready for the discoveries published in December of this year, because boy were there entirely too many. Maybe none were as groundbreaking as a new species of Spinosaurus or sequencing the entire genome of a recently extinct mammal, but all of them were very interesting nonetheless, and some even have some rather far-reaching consequences for the future of different subfields of paleontology. So, without further ado, let's do December. Fat horn-headed reptile had teeth for days. Reptile is the common term for a bunch of animals that aren't mammals, amphibians, fish, or invertebrates. They tend to have scales, but don't have to, tend to lay eggs, but don't have to, and tend to have splayed limbs, but don't have to. You can see why I hate the term reptile on a purely taxonomical and nerdy level. It used to mean something, but now it's hard to square with how much diversity there was going on from the Carboniferous period all the way to the Cretaceous. I bring it up because there are really just two major splits of reptiles that we need to know before I get to my point.
In the beginning,
there's the broad-clade Sauropsida, which is roughly equivalent to what taxonomists used to call reptilia, based on the common term reptile. Within it are two other clades, PaleoReptilia and Eureptilia. Eureptilia is the basket into which all living reptiles belong, including crocs, birds, dinosaurs, and others. We don't need to bother with them. PaleoReptilia is a slightly older offshoot that produced most of the reptilian firsts. First marine reptiles, bipedal reptiles, reptiles with good ears, and the first giant herbivorous land reptiles. They all went extinct by the end of the Triassic period, which is why almost no one outside of paleontology knows anything about them. If things had gone differently, perhaps the general public would have some modern examples to point and laugh at. Everything I just laid out is subject to change because this early period in tetrapod evolution is not as robust as more recent periods. Now, I'm not saying any of this is flimsy by any means, but the history of reptile science is long and annoying enough for like 6 seasons of an HBO series and a movie. Within the PaleoReptilia is the Procalophonomorpha order, a great big basket containing the first bipedal reptiles, the bolosaurs, the largest terrestrial herbivores to live on Earth until the rise of the dinosaurs, the pariasaurs, and a group of small, squat-bodied, short-tailed critters that carried around some interesting chompers, and often a pair of spiny crests jutting out of the cheeks, the Procalophonoids. It's these last guys that gained a new member in December of 2024. A bunch of limey nerds published their work on a brand new Procalophonid from the late Triassic-aged fissure-filled deposits of southwest England in the journal Papers in Paleontology. They named this animal, which specifically came from the subsidiary fill at Site 5A of the Cromwell quarry, Thriordatoth cosmatos. This critter was named based on a bunch of bits from the upper jaw, the maxilla, and the front of the lower jaw, the dentary, plus a ton of teeth. This may not seem like much, and it really isn't, but these critters were mostly herbivorous, so their teeth were extremely distinct from genus to genus or even species to species. So, even though most of the remains are teeth, they can be confidently placed into a new basket. Thriordatoth had some wonky teeth too. It had really thick molars in the upper jaw, some of which had 3 points, a condition called tricuspid. The lower jaws had single-pointed teeth that were thin from side to side but thick from front to back, almost like blades. The authors hypothesized these chompers would have helped this animal crunch up very hard foods, like thick land plants, roots and tubers, or the shells of armored arthropods. UK theropod teeth prove it was a happening place. The best Mesozoic fossil record in England is that of the early Cretaceous. It's what's revealed Baryonyx, Ceratoseucops, Rhiperovenator, Neovenator, Vectipelta, Iguanodon, Megalosaurus, Hylaeosaurus, and so much more. Many of these fossils come from 2 major geologic basins, one called the Weald Subbasin in East and West Sussex of mainland England. The other is called the Wessex subbasin, west of Sussex, with lots of outcrops on the Isle of Wight. They are of roughly similar times and have revealed similar groups of animals. The Wessex subbasin contains lots of geologic rock formations, but the major one here is the Wealden group. The equivalent layers in the Weld subbasin are the Hastings and Weld clay groups. The unfortunate thing here is that the majority of all the good fossil finds come from the top of the Wessex Formation, a geologic formation that makes up a majority of the Wealden group. But all of those fossils are coming from the top of it, plus the one above it, the Vectis Formation. In the other Weld subbasin, the fossils are all coming out of the Upper Weld Clay Formation, which is the one near the top of the Weld Clay group. The uncreatively named Lower Weld Clay Formation right below it hasn't been as fruitful. This has made it difficult to account for the geographical distribution of living things over deep time. Were the groups of critters found in the upper bits of these rock units newcomers, or did they have a long prehistory that is not preserved, or that has just not been found yet? A group of British scientists published a paper in December of 2024 in the journal Papers in Paleontology, in which they reanalyze a bunch of tooth fossils and describe some recently discovered tooth fossils, all from the Hastings group of the Weld subbasin. This is the lower half of the early Cretaceous rocks, and understanding the biodiversity at this time would go a long way to understanding how things came to be in younger rocks. The authors found that the teeth had definitive traits of Spinosaurids, Tyrannosauroids, and Dromaeosaurids. These are all groups that show up in the younger rock formations. This means that these groups have more than established themselves in the area for quite a long time before the fossil record preserves better remains. The authors found that the teeth they had were actually distinct enough to not belong to already known genera or species of Spinosaurs, Tyrannosauroids, and Dromaeosaurids from the early Cretaceous of England. However, they did the right thing and decided not to make up any new labels for these teeth until actual body fossils can be found. We don't want to replicate what was going on in the 1800s, right? Another pterosaur missing link found? Pterosaurs were largely divided into two major groups: the long-tailed, short-necked, big-headed, short-legged, small-armed but big-fingered rhamphorhynchoids, and the short-tailed, long-necked, small-bodied with equal-length armed segmented pterodactyloids. However, new groups have been found over the last few decades that help to break these groups up a little and rearrange a few other bits and pieces here and there. Now, there are a bunch of offshoot groups, with one large transition between the rhamphorhynchoid-type pterosaurs into a group called the Darwinopterans, and then to the pterodactyloids. The Darwinopterans showcase a near-perfect transition in features between the groups to either side of it. The combination of the pterodactyloids and many of the Darwinopterans came to be known as the monophenestrata, all thanks to sharing a condition of the skull bones, in which there is little or no bony separation between the nostril opening and the antorbital fenestra, which is usually a second hole in front of the eye socket. This now opens up all sorts of gaps to be filled by more transitional forms. One such transitional form was described in December of 2024 by Dave Hone, Adam Fitch, Stefan Seltzer, and Renee and Bruce Lauer, based on a nearly complete skeleton found in a German quarry in 2015. The team named the new flapper Scyphosaura bavarica, and it shows a clear transition from Darwinopterans to pterodactyloids. It has a big head with a crest on the snout, a long neck, a small body about the same size as the skull, long hind legs, a short tail, and long humeri and forearms compared to the long wing finger. This same study also found that the Scottish yark placed rather well into the gap between the rhamphorhynchoids and the Darwinopterans, filling out a beautiful sequence of evolution. Jurassic Argentina had its own flying monkey lizard. Speaking of monophenestratans, Argentina has just released another monophenestratan banger. When dinosaur fossils from South America are brought up, it's usually all the giant things that were roaming around in the Cretaceous, but there are some fairly good Jurassic deposits down there too. One of the better ones is the early Jurassic-aged Cañadón Asfalto Formation of Argentina. Big scary meat eaters, big-ass long necks, and little beaked ornithopods have been coming out of this formation for years. Recently, a block of mudstone containing the associated remains of a small pterosaur were collected from an outcrop of the Cañadón Asfalto formation called Queso Rayado that normally produces a lot of microvertebrate fossils, little mammals, lizards, frogs, stuff like that. This block was taken to the Egidio Ferruglio Paleontology Museum in Trelew, Chubut, Argentina, where they were further prepared. The preparation and CT scans of the specimen revealed a partial skull, some teeth, 4 back vertebrae, a hand bone, and some miscellaneous bone fragments. Alexandra Fernandez, Diego Pol, and Oliver Rauhat published this new pterosaur in the Royal Society Open Science as Melcampter pateco. It represents the currently oldest known member of the Monophenestrata group. Pterosaurs known for having a big old hole in their skull made up of what was once 2 holes, the nasal opening and the antorbital fenestra. This little guy hints at a hidden diversity of pterosaurs worldwide, but especially in the southern hemisphere during the early Jurassic that is only just beginning to be uncovered. Small-headed prosauropod may be largest biped ever. The sauropod dinosaurs were the largest things to ever walk on land. However, they evolved from small ancestors. Those ancestors were mostly bipedal animals with thick noses, pointy teeth, and sharp hand claws for defense and grabbing or digging for food. These ancestors used to be called prosauropods before their phylogenetics were reorganized. They are now more accurately referred to as non-sauropodan sauropodomorphs. However, the term prosauropod can still be used as an informal common name for the group. Anyways, these animals were the largest land animals from the late Triassic till the early Jurassic, when they began to be replaced by the true sauropods. The best fossil record of these animals comes from South America and Africa, but there is also a really good record of them from Asia, and a new one was named in December of 2024 by a team of Chinese scientists in the journal PeerJ. The new prosauropod, named Lishulong Wangai, comes from an outcrop of the early Jurassic Age Shawan member of the Lufeng Formation in Jiudu Village, Konglashong Town, Lufeng County, Yunnan Province, China. The specimen consists of a giant, well-preserved skull and 9 neck vertebrae. The skull of Lishulong is technically the largest of these animals known from China. Based on what other prosauropods Lishulong was related to and its proportions, this is what the animal may have looked like. This makes it look rather pinheaded, but also could make it as long as 13 meters 43 feet, making it one of the largest prosauropods of all time, and among the largest bipedal animals to ever live. Of course, being outsized by the massive theropods you usually see come up when biggest bipeds are discussed. This therapsid stretches back the clade to the early or middle Permian. The disarticulated partial skeleton of a therapsid Gorgonopsian has been recovered from the Balearic island of Majorca, and it may be one of the most important finds of its type. The therapsids are a group of synapsids that eventually evolved into mammals as a sister group to the Sauropsida, and basically every reptile and bird ever. The therapsids evolved from a common ancestor with the sphenacodonts, your pelycosaurs like Adaphosaurus, Dimetrodon, and company. This all occurred in the Permian period, 298 to 251 million years ago. However, the fauna of the Permian can be very roughly divided into everything going on in the early Permian and everything going on in the middle and late Permian. This is due to a gap in the fossil record that represents a minor mass extinction called Olson's extinction, which saw the end of the global rainforests and swamps that were already dwindling in the aftermath of the Carboniferous period, as well as the end or reduction of many groups of non-therapsid synapsids, reptiliomorphs, and temnospondyle amphibians. They were replaced by the true eureptilians, as well as therapsids, the dinocephalians, anomodonts, gorgonopsians, and cynodonts, many of which carried on across the Permian mass extinction and into the early Triassic. The new Majorcan therapsid, described by a bunch of Spanish, American, and German scientists in Nature Communications, may well be the oldest indisputable therapsid, and is definitely the oldest known member of the Gorgonopsia group, a group of animals known for their very mammal-like appearance, saber-toothed canines, and semi-upright gaits. The critter was collected from bed Na2 of the Torrent de Nadala fossil site in Banyalbufar, which dates to the Artinskian or Kungurian stages of the Ciceralian epoch of the early Permian, either 290 to 283 million years ago or 283 to 273 million years ago. The author team didn't name the animal because Gorgonopsians are apparently notoriously conservative in their anatomy over time, which means they changed relatively little. That would make it hard to make a solid determination that this animal is definitely 100% new to all genera or species that have ever been found. It does, however, prove that these animals evolved in a short 10 million year span right after that early Permian Olson's extinction, quickly becoming the world's main land animals before being snuffed out 40 million years or so later. Tiny leg bone belongs to earliest plant-eating dino in Asia. The tiny femur of a small ornithischian dinosaur was discovered next to a subway station in Chongqing, China. This inconspicuous bone was found to technically be the oldest form of ornithischian dinosaur in Asia by a team of Chinese scientists in the journal iScience. The fossil was found eroding out of the Dongyumiao member of the Ziluzhing Formation, which technically makes it from the Sinemurian to the Pliensbachian stages of the early Jurassic. This is unusual because the majority of ornithischian dinosaurs known from this time in Asia are all armored dinosaurs, but this femur belonged to an animal that may have looked like later forms of small ornithopod, like the Hypsilophodonts, or like earlier diverging ornithischians, such as the tusked Heterodontosaurs. But since it's just a single bone, nothing much else can be said of the thing, and it may have been better off as an indeterminate ornithischian. Xenodens is dead. Long live Carinodens. Back in 2021, notoriously controversial paleontologist Nicholas Longrich and some non-controversial colleagues published a paper in Hall Open Science on a single maxilla or upper jaw specimen of a small mosasaur from Morocco. They named the animal Xenodens culminacari, meaning alien tooth that cuts like a saw, due to the super bizarre flattened blade shape of the teeth and their arrangement, like the cutting surface of a hacksaw. Longrich is controversial for abusing his graduate students, enough to have breached his university's dignity and respect policy, enough for him to have lost a nearly £1 million research leadership award. He is also controversial for basically being a parachute scientist, going to universities and museums in low-income countries, and often without getting the expertise of local scientists in his papers, though sometimes he does do this. Mexico has been his most recent escape from English and American institutions, but a majority of his work has been done on Moroccan fossils from the Oulad Abdoun Basin and other sites, including Thalassatitan, Kinjaria, Stelladens, Leptostomia, Pleurodens, and of course the more relevant Xenodens. Henry Sharp, Mark Powers, and Michael Caldwell published a paper in The Anatomical Record, offering a well-reasoned argument that the jaw of Xenodens may actually be a forgery of sorts. They outlined that the major issue with using these Moroccan specimens is that the majority of them are collected under non-scientific supervision. Now, this isn't inherently an elitist position. The authors of the rebuttal paper are merely seeming to state that there is an extremely active fossil market coming out of Morocco. So even if some of the people collecting and selling stuff actually know their stuff and are genuinely and painstakingly collecting these fossils, there is no way to be certain that they are unless you find some guys who document every single step of the excavation and preparation process as a scientist would do. This is not the case for the guy selling 1,000 mosasaur teeth or 500 trilobites at the Denver Gem and Mineral Show. More relevant to the Xenodens jaw, Sharp, Powers, and Caldwell note that the connection between the four teeth and the jaw of the Xenodens holotype look a lot more like adhesive used by an enterprising individual to make a more impressive specimen to sell. The teeth are likely real, and the jaw most likely is as well, but the connection between the two, and therefore the anatomical traits used by Longrich and colleagues to name a new animal, are forged. This team offers some evidence to prove their point. One is that they CT scanned the jaw of a known forged specimen, This shows you what it looks like when a tooth really belongs to the jaw it rests in, and what a tooth looks like if it's attached to the jaw with adhesives. No CT scans were done on the Xenoden's jaw, and the author team suggests that Longrich actively do this in order to prove their initial work valid. Secondly, Longrich and company said in the original paper that the roots of the teeth in the Xenoden's jaw are fused to it. Sharp and company argue that they aren't, and instead show a calcification and ankylosing or hardening of the tooth root. Thirdly, the shape and size of the real teeth in the Xenoden's jaw are more reminiscent of an ontogenetic growth stage that may belong to a form of Mosasaur like Carinoden's. Such a change in tooth shape is seen in living lizards, going from slightly pointy backwards pointing teeth to wide flat things. The amount of work the Sharp team provides is enough to convince me, but if it wasn't for you, the response to it might be. Sharp and company have publicly stated they emailed Longrich and Co. to get access to the specimen or any files that may exist for it. Longrich states he never received these emails, but the Sharp crew hold fast to the claim that they did, in fact, send out these messages. Regardless of the matter, all of it seems rather fishy. Wouldn't you want to CT scan your own fossil to make sure you weren't wasting a bunch of time and money over a potential chimeric forgery? Guess we must wait and see how it resolves. Maybe the specimen resides in Morocco, which its specimen number suggests, so experts over there may be contacted. Stay tuned. Diatrima lives? Walking with Beasts vindicated? Hot take. I liked Walking with Beasts more than Walking with Dinosaurs, not necessarily for the effects. In some places, beasts look better, and in others, dinosaurs looks better, but, none hold a candle to the goat walking with monsters. The Gastornis segments in the first episode have definitely captured a lot of nostalgia for many of us who grew up rewatching the hell out of these documentaries. Unfortunately, it did not age well with regards to the science. One major thing is that it turns out the bird was an herbivore. That huge, wide, non-curved beak was used for cracking hard nuts or fruits and slicing up leaves. The other major thing is the name. So, Gastornis has been known to science for a long time, since 1855. It was originally named from a fragmentary skeleton found in France. I won't delve much into the true extent of the history of this genus because it literally spans almost 200 years. In short, a bunch of species were named based on specimens from Paleocene and Eocene formations across Europe. Then, notorious jackass and half of the Bone Wars, Edward Drinker Cope named a new genus of big-ass bird from Eocene New Mexico, Diatrima, in 1874. From there, a bunch more big bird bones were found in the US, Canada, and Europe, and all of them would variously be named species of either Gastornis or Diatrima. Like seriously, they just kept spitting out species names, sometimes even for a single toe bone. Some scientists tried to wade through this mess in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. This sort of resulted in a general consensus that Diatrima wasn't valid and had to be sunk into the older Gastornis genus. That's how it's been for my entire life. Now, a new paper by Gerald Mayer, Cécile Muir, Chanviret, Estelle Bourdon, and Michael Stash in Paleontologica Electronica argues for the validity of Diatrima once again. They describe a new foot bone from the British London clay and a new skull from the German Geisel Valley, which they attribute to Diatrima. They found distinct anatomical differences between the shoulder bones, skull, and foot bones of Diatrima and Gastornis. They even found some possible evidence of sexual dimorphism in the Diatrima geiselensis species, though this probably requires more specimens to better test. And that's been the discoveries published in December of 2024. Well, not all of them, but most of them. You've now made it through all of PaleoRewind, but come back here tomorrow for the giant compilation of every creator's video. It will definitely be a blast. For more interesting stories about nature, the history of life, or what goes bump in the night, subscribe, like this video, drop a comment in the comment section below, and hit the bell icon to stay in the know with everything Edge. Thanks for watching.